The players have been standing their ground, and the players have been right this whole time. In order for the WNBA to save this league right now, you have to open the books. Let me repeat, open the books. What's the big deal? Guess what? You open the books and...
In the insulated, multi-billion-dollar sphere of professional sports ownership, there often comes a moment in contentious labor disputes when negotiations shift from calculated strategy to visible frustration. When a union feels its leverage diminishing, whether through an ineffective strike threat or stalled talks, its messaging can become more urgent and public-facing. Within the Women's National Basketball Association, some veteran voices have taken to social media to criticize ownership, calling for greater transparency and, in some cases, access to detailed financial records to substantiate claims about league profitability. To critics, this can appear unrealistic or legally impractical, given that privately owned enterprises are not typically required to disclose proprietary financial ledgers beyond agreed-upon auditing frameworks. However, dismissing these demands outright overlooks the underlying mistrust driving them. Players are reacting to a period of rapid financial change, highlighted by surging television ratings and heightened commercial visibility following the arrival of stars like Caitlin Clark. After years of messaging centered on financial losses or modest margins, the league's sudden valuation growth has intensified scrutiny. From the player's perspective, calls to open the books are less about entitlement and more about verifying whether the reported financial constraints accurately reflect the league's current trajectory. Former standout Angel McCoughtry has publicly defended the union's position, framing transparency as a matter of fairness. Yet the legal and structural realities of private ownership complicate that expectation. While collective bargaining agreements can include audit rights and financial disclosures, full public access to proprietary spreadsheets is rarely standard practice in privately held organizations. The clash, therefore, is not simply emotional. It reflects a deeper divide between labor's demand for reassurance and ownership's adherence to conventional corporate boundaries.
The players have been standing their ground, and the players have been right this whole time. In order for the WNBA to save this league right now, you have to open the books. Let me repeat, open the books. What's the big deal? Guess what? You open the books and...
Calls to open the books reflect the height of frustration in a tense labor dispute, but they also highlight a fundamental disagreement about structure and authority. Within the Women's National Basketball Association, some advocates argue that full financial transparency is necessary to rebuild trust and verify claims about profitability. From ownership standpoint, however, that demand can sound like a misunderstanding of how private enterprises function. In most corporate environments, employees, even highly visible and culturally influential ones, do not possess unrestricted rights to audit proprietary financial ledgers. Access to detailed accounting is typically governed by negotiated audit provisions within a collective bargaining agreement, not by public ultimatum. This tension reflects two competing perspectives. Players believe that their labor, marketability, and star power, amplified in recent seasons by figures such as Caitlin Clark, have materially increased league revenues, and therefore they seek assurances that growth is being shared equitably. Ownership, on the other hand, emphasizes its role in supplying capital, assuming operational risk, and maintaining long-term infrastructure. The disagreement is less about emotion than about governance. Labor views transparency as a pathway to fairness, while management views unrestricted disclosure as incompatible with standard corporate practice. When former stars like Angel McCoughtry publicly champion transparency demands, it intensifies the rhetoric but does not alter the legal framework that governs privately held organizations. In most professional leagues, financial clarity is achieved through structured audits and negotiated reporting mechanisms, not open-ended access to internal spreadsheets. The debate, therefore, centers not on whether transparency matters, but on how it is defined, limited, and implemented within the boundaries of corporate law and collective bargaining.
In the books.
Because they don't have to. They don't have to. It's the same reason that the owner of Target don't open the books to the person working register number 6. The same reason that the owner of McDonald's isn't opening the books to the guy.
In most privately held businesses, ownership does not grant open-ended access to proprietary financial statements simply because employees request it. That same structural principle applies within the Women's National Basketball Association. Players, even as elite and highly visible professionals, are not equity partners or board members. They operate under collectively bargained employment terms. From ownership's perspective, offering increased base salaries, housing support, and other concessions represents negotiation within established corporate norms, not an obligation to disclose every internal ledger to win a public debate. Yet reducing the player demands to ignorance overlooks the deeper mistrust fueling them. Over the past year, the league has experienced a dramatic surge in visibility and commercial momentum, much of it associated with the arrival of Caitlin Clark. Television audiences spiked, arenas reported sellouts, and a multi-billion-dollar media rights agreement reshaped long-term projections. At the same time, expansion franchises in markets such as Toronto and Portland reportedly commanded nine-figure entry fees. Against that backdrop, claims of continued operating losses naturally invite scrutiny from players who see revenue headlines but hear caution at the bargaining table. The tension centers on accounting methodology. Owners may legitimately allocate expenses, arena leases, executive compensation, marketing costs, depreciation, within legal frameworks that reduce reported net income. Players, aware of how Hollywood accounting can minimize profits on paper, feel that growth is being absorbed through expense structures before it reaches revenue-sharing formulas. Their calls for transparency, including questions surrounding executive compensation such as that of Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, are less about public spectacle and more about symbolic reassurance. If leadership compensation appears substantial while team salary caps remain constrained, it deepens suspicion about how new wealth is distributed. Meanwhile, ownership can exert pressure without engaging in public exchanges. Extended periods of silence during negotiations, such as pauses in communication, can serve as strategic tools, shifting uncertainty onto the union and testing internal cohesion. Silence in high-stakes bargaining often amplifies anxiety within a workforce, particularly when free agency timelines and seasonal preparations are approaching. In that sense, the dispute is unfolding on two levels: a financial debate over revenue definitions and a psychological contest over leverage, patience, and unity.
Off season to not respond. And I actually think they use the waiting game there as a part of gamesmanship to cause a rift between economic classes, because not every single player in the league can afford to miss the WNBA.
Extended silence in labor negotiations can function as a calculated pressure tactic. In disputes within the Women's National Basketball Association, ownership groups, many with diversified wealth beyond basketball, may have greater capacity to endure delays than players whose income depends directly on seasonal contracts. That imbalance can create internal strain inside a union, particularly when membership spans very different financial realities. High-profile stars with endorsement portfolios, such as Breanna Stewart, may have supplemental income streams, while role players and those without major sponsorships rely far more heavily on league salaries. When negotiations stall and communication slows, uncertainty can amplify those economic divides. Players awaiting clarity on contracts, free agency, or season timelines may grow anxious as deadlines approach. In that environment, frustration can shift inward, with some members questioning strategy, pace, or risk tolerance. Silence, whether intentional or procedural, often magnifies speculation and tests solidarity, especially in a league where career windows are short and financial security varies widely across the roster spectrum. At the same time, unions face their own internal governance challenges. Leadership is tasked with balancing transparency with confidentiality, as certain negotiating details must remain private to preserve leverage. Critics may interpret limited disclosure as secrecy, while leaders may view it as strategic necessity. In high-stakes collective bargaining, both management and labor navigate optics alongside economics, and maintaining trust within membership can be just as critical as extracting concession from ownership.
Now, what about the lack of do y'all address the lack of transparency the agent said they're receiving from the actual players union? Do you guys address that? See, there's been a lack of transparency from the WNBPA to the players that it's representing and their representation.
Critics of the Women's National Basketball Players Association argue that transparency concerns run both ways. While union leadership has publicly pressed ownership within the Women's National Basketball Association for greater financial disclosure, some agents and players have reportedly expressed frustration about limited access to the full, unfiltered details of collective bargaining proposals. In high-stakes negotiations, leadership often filters information to preserve leverage or control messaging, but that strategy can create tension if members feel key concessions or trade-offs are not being communicated clearly. Agents, who are trained to analyze contract language and long-term financial implications, naturally seek direct visibility into terms that affect their clients' careers, and any perception of restricted access can erode internal trust. At the same time, it is important to recognize that labor negotiations frequently involve confidentiality agreements and strategic messaging on both sides. Union executives must balance transparency with tactical discretion, just as ownership does. Accusations that leadership is deliberately distorting offers to manufacture anger are serious claims, but they are difficult to substantiate without documented evidence. Internal disagreements during bargaining are not unusual, particularly in a league where financial circumstances vary widely between top-earning stars and players who rely almost entirely on league salaries. The broader tension reflects timing and expectations. The surge in visibility associated with players like Caitlin Clark has fueled a belief among some athletes that a historic financial inflection point is underway. Others caution that sustainable profitability must be demonstrated over multiple seasons before dramatic structural changes are locked in. Ownership's reported periods of silence may be interpreted either as calculated leverage or a standard negotiating pause. Context matters. Ultimately, the dispute appears less like a psychological collapse and more like a classic labor management impasse shaped by distrust, uneven financial security among members, and competing views about how quickly growth should translate into guaranteed compensation.